Manyeva priya sarva kamebhyo yukta uchate tada. Translation. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. Text 19. Yata dipno nivatashto nengate sopamasmita yogino yata chitasya yunjato yogam atmanaha. Translation. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Text 20 through 23. Yatro paramate chitam nirudam yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pasyan atmani tushyati sukham atyanikam yatad buddhigrayam atindriyam veti yatra nachaivayam stitaschala Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tata yasmin stito nadukena gurunapi vachalyate tam vidya dukha samyoga viyogam yoga samnitam. Translation. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Text 24. Sa nischayena yoktvayo yogo nirvina chetasa sankalpa brahmavan kamas tyaktva sarvan asheshataha manashai vindriya gramam vinayamya samantaha. Translation. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of false ego and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Text 25. Shanai shanar uparimed budya driti gritaya atma samstamana kritva na kinchid apis chintayet. Translation. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Text 26. Yato nischalati manaschalam astriham tatastato niyam yatad atmanyeva vishamnayat. Translation. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Text 27. Prashanta manasam yenam yoginam sukham uttamam upaiti shanta rajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. Translation. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful, his passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. Text 28, final text. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. Translation. Steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, The yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the supreme consciousness. Back to text 18. I'll read the translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. Purport. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 9:4, 18 through 20. Savayamana Krishna Padara Vindayor Vachamsi Vaikunta Guna Navarnane Kalo Hare Mandira Marjana Adishu Shrutim Chakar Chutya Satkato Daye Mukunda Lingalaya Darshine Shout Britya Gatra Sparshe Ninga Sangamam Griyanam cha tatpada saroja sarobye shimat tolasya rasanam tad arpite Padao hare kshetra padanusarpane shiro rishikesha pada bivandane kamam cha dasye natu kama yaya yato tatma shaloka janashaya rati. Quote, King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flower offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulasi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee, end quote. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is the perfect process for transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita. Yukta. So he defines yukta as well situated in yoga. Well situated in yoga. And in this chapter 6, Arjuna is getting some clarification about yoga, about different kinds of yoga. And Sankhya Yoga is the name of the chapter, the analytical study. And talking about these yogis who are doing, so many different things, and they're trying to become one with Brahman, and this oneness, maybe even trying to become God, or thinking there's just a oneness where you lose your individuality. And but the much easier path is bhakti yoga, where you devote all your thinking and all of your senses, you'd engage them in Krishna's service. And the impersonalist yogi, or it can take many, many lifetimes to make it even a few steps up the ladder. But bhakti yoga is a shortcut. It's like an elevator all the way to the top. And it's not necessarily easy, but it is, we do have a much clarification, and we can have the chance to save a lot of time, which we want to save as much time as possible. Time is our most valuable resource. You cannot buy back a minute of time for $1 million. And so taking advantage of this lifetime and the time we have to become devoted, to try to find a spiritual master and devote your time following his instructions, tadvati pranipatena upadek shanti teganam. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. And sometimes we have to have the proper aim in mind, what all of society needs to realize. What are the problems? The problems are this old age, disease, and death, and they don't really have any answers on how to get around this. And sometimes we can miss it. And there's a story Prabhupada would tell about this person took a ride with a boatsman, and he goes, and this boatsman was just a boatsman. And this person, I think, thought himself to be a scholar. And so he's on the boat, and he said, "Do you understand all the stars above? Do you see do you understand?" He said, "No, I'm just a boatsman. I don't understand, all of that." And he said, "Well, 50% of your life is wasted." And he said, "Do you understand about all the trees and foliage and all the plants and things like that?" And he said, "No, I don't understand everything about all those things." And he said, "Well, 25% more of your life is wasted." And then the boatsman saw a big storm coming, and the boat actually started to sink and was sinking. And he said, the boatsman said, "Sir, do you know how to swim?" And he said, "No, I don't." And so he said, "Well, sorry, but you're going to be carried down the river, and your life is over." And so with all that knowledge, but missing something so simple as to know how to swim and how to get out of a precarious situation like that. And so we just want to serve Lord Krishna, and we want to remember him always. And Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Veti Tatvataha Tyatvadeham Pranarjanma Naitimam Etiso Arjuna. One who remembers my transcendental activities and appearance does not, after leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So that's Krishna's promise to us. He's given us so many promises and hints. So we have to have faith, in the process. And we have to, because without faith, it was said recently, there's no happiness. So we have to have a little bit of faith to get happiness. And happiness is something that is nice, but even more than that is trying, serving the Lord. And that's really true happiness. And the Lord, Nityananda, with Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda just wants to serve Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya said, he gave us the Maha Mantra and said that this is the only way in this degraded age of Kali. But and so he was giving it to everybody. But there were some people there's still some people that are godless, or are too wrapped up in some sort of conception of their piety that they have. And so he said to Nityananda, he said, those people are yours. You give the holy name to those people. And so Nityananda, even though He's the Lord himself. He's always been with the Lord and wanting to serve the Lord, whether it's Balaram serving Krishna or Ananta Shesh serving Narayan, or Lakshmanam serving Lord Ram. Just always right there, just wanting to serve. I think that's so nice. And let's see here, text 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So a lamp in a windless place does not waver. So controlling our mind, all the disturbances, none of us can say that we don't have these little disturbances, and they come, and as we climb up the yoga, as we progress, we're able to control this mind, this enemy, which can be the best of friends or worst of enemies. So we're learning to control the mind and point it in the direction we want, and letting these desires, these useless desires, these desires that are not needed, anartas, which are useless things, unwanted things, we're letting those fall by the wayside. And it's just like we're getting these muscles, hopefully these muscles of bhakti. It's not an immediate process, but it can be, but it takes time to grow. And so we're getting better and better. And sometimes we forget how far we've come, but maybe a way to get positive with ourselves, maybe if we're feeling a little down, maybe that's something we can remember, is like, yeah, I may be feeling down right now, or I may be a little distressed or depressed, but think about how much I've learned, how much I did not know, how I used to be in the ocean flailing, and I caught a rope. Someone threw a rope out to me and I caught it, and I've been saved, So hopefully we're feeling happy most of the time. Hopefully we're feeling pretty hopeful, because that's called looking on the bright side. And really we have it so nice. We're the lucky ones that, we get to chant every day. We've got all these secrets we've uncovered with the grace of the parampara. We've uncovered, and they've shown us the secrets. And so now we give it to others, and that makes Krishna very happy when we can give it to others. And they all need it. And a lot of times we're surprised by how nice people are when we go up to them and reveal our heart, or just start talking, and just a lot of them are looking for something like this. And always remaining steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So remembering Paramatma, the Lord within, and it's said to meditate on the Lord within. And there's two types of samadhi, and the highest samadhi is where one is not engaged in any sort of sense, doesn't take any delight in the senses, in the mundane senses, and that's the highest samadhi. And then Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the mirror of the heart, or the clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. And in the spiritual world, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's said that it's almost like a mirror, the way the gopis, it's kind of like a transcendental mirror, the way there's some transcendental competition, the way the gopis are kind of competing with Krishna. And when they see Krishna happy, their happiness goes up, and it's this back and forth of ever increasing bliss. So that's a place, that's a transcendental mirror. But most of the time in the material world, people are trying to enjoy this like a mango in a mirror. How much enjoyment really is it? when you see a mango in a mirror, you can see it, but there's no real enjoyment there. And that's like the fantasies, the unrealistic, unhelpful fantasies that we might have that are so easy to go deeper into, or you can be kind of thrown into thinking about a fantasy or a weird thought or a dream or something and kind of get stuck on it. Just leap out of bed and chant, and don't sit there. Just, wake up, sleeping soul. And if one gets the chance to take Krishna consciousness, it's said that one should take that chance immediately. One should purchase it without delay. So it's ready for us to purchase. And all we have to do is tell the Lord, I'm yours from this day forward. And he hears that. And he's there to help. When someone's committed, he's helping them. And yeah, it can take a long time, but growth isn't always obvious, immediate, or painless. It can take some time, but Krishna's there helping you, and Guru is there helping you. And it's Chaturmasya right now, and 4 months, the rainy season. In India, they call it the rainy season. And traditionally, a lot of people, they may not shave for 4 months, and they may not even eat twice a day. And the first month is like they don't eat spinach. We don't eat spinach. And then the second month, yogurt. Third month, milk. And then the fourth month, urad dal, which is a very protein-rich dal. But Narada Muni, he by serving the Vaishnavas for those 4 months, he became Narada Muni, and so it's a very special time where you can make even more spiritual advancement. And traditionally, the Brahmanas don't travel; they stay in one place during the rainy season, and so it's an exciting time, Chaturmasya. And text 24, one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon, without exception, all material desires born of false ego, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Rupa Goswami says here, the process of bhakti yoga can be executed successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. And there's the eightfold path of mystic yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and you've got yama as the first stage, which is prescribed regulative principles. And then number 2, niyama, prescribed regulative duties. Number 1, yama is like, the 4 regulative principles. And then number 2, niyama, it's like chanting it's daily prescribed duties, like chanting our rounds. And then number 3 is asana, sitting postures. Number 4 is pranayam, breathing, controlled breathing. And then pratyahara is number 5, which is what's it called? Detachment. And then number 6 is dhyana, meditation. And number 7 is like what's it called when you focus on something? It's like starts with a C. Some type of meditation that's more focused, concentrated meditation. And then number 8 is samadhi. And samadhi. And so that's and we take some of those, we listen to some of those, but there's some different schools of thought on these things. But Jnana Yoga, there's Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But these other kinds, this chapter is really making it clear that these other kinds are not so fast, they're not so nice, and they're not so perfect as Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, devotional service. In text 25 says, gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Of course, that's the capitalized word self, which is like the Paramatma, the higher self, and the self in relation to Krishna, knowing the self to be just a servant of Krishna, or a servant of the servant of the servant, dasonu dasanu das. And that is the proper way to view one's existence, is in relation to the Supreme. And the Supreme Krishna owns everything. So he's the Supreme Proprietor. And he's a Chucha. And it says gradually, step by step, which is Shanai Shanai, step by step. So it's like when we're cleaning the temple, or when you're doing a project, sometimes you get overwhelmed. I've got to clean the whole temple, or I've got to do 100 things. And it's said to just enjoy each step if you can. Just enjoy the step, enjoy the journey. We want to get to the top of the mountain, but you want to enjoy the climb, and you want to focus on enjoy each progression and step by step, and the good and the bad, and getting beyond the good and the bad, and seeing, not being mired in duality. Just like even it says here, it's like, even if something bad happens, both in happiness and distress, he is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings, both in their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. So we're seeing the true equality of all beings. We're seeing, what do they all have in common? They're all spirit soul. They all have Paramatma inside the heart. They have Krishna inside the heart guiding them. And so we have to respect all living beings like that, and see and have a sensitivity to that, and seeing what we all have. What do all jivas have in common? And both in their happiness and distress. And so whether people are very happy or distressed, we're just equiposed. And even if we maybe lose a family member, or we feel like something really bad happens to us or around us, or we're not going to be too affected. We're kind of grave, and just grave all the time to some extent. And we're not going to be mired in the muck. And so we're kind of trying to be above all that, like above the way you can fly above a storm, and then you can look down. The sun can be shining up there above the clouds, but there can be a big storm down below. Going on to text 26, from whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. The way a tortoise will withdraw its limbs within itself, and it's always protected by its shell, but it's withdrawn. It knows how to protect itself. So we have to know how to protect ourselves, and we can withdraw those limbs, and then duality doesn't affect us so much, the good and the bad. Purport: the nature of the mind is flickering and unsteady, but a self-realized yogi has to control the mind. The mind should not control him. One who controls the mind, and therefore the senses as well, is called Goswami or Swami, and one who is controlled by the mind is called Godasa, or the servant of the senses. A Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. In transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesh, or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. So serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. So by chanting our rounds every day, by chanting the Maha Mantra, which means the great mantra, we are purifying our senses over time. And serving Krishna with purified senses is Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. So we want to control the senses. It's like trying to teach a kindergarten class or something, or first graders. I was doing some substitute teaching a couple years back, 3 years back. And when you got a room full of first graders or kindergartners, it can feel a little out of control at times. That's why you have to, if you can try to, and a lot of us, we don't want to come off negative. We don't want to come off angry. We don't want to get to that point. So how do you control and not get angry? And part of it is nipping it in the bud, right? When the problem starts to arise, you nip it in the bud and you bring them in, you personalize yourself, and you say, and you also have a way to reward. You'd be surprised how a group of children is quiet with a little piece of candy. You can bring a whole class under your control. It's just like, it's the simplest things, and it seems almost too simple. But use the simple. It's not necessarily complicated, but I'm willing to trick myself into getting the results I want. You know, I'm okay with tricking myself a little bit, or using a reward, a simple reward, or a little bit of delayed, saying a little bit of a reward or delayed reward can be very powerful. But if you have to, you can call the principal's office, and sometimes there's one or two that you can see that are making the whole class, that are bringing the whole class up to this level. And so sometimes you got to say, hey, if you're not willing to behave, I'm going to have to call the office. Nothing against you, but you might have to do a little bit of timeout. So we have to sometimes give ourselves a timeout, or have some emergency measures to when these undesired behaviors that we don't want, we have to say, all right, emergency, bring the emergency crew in. This is not going to be tolerated anymore. So it's about not tolerating certain things and just nipping it in the bud right away. And it gets easier. And then once the class knows you, once the kindergarten class knows you a little bit, then it's more of a personal level. And it's, usually I was going into these rooms and I would never see them again. But I know people that have substitute taught, and they've developed a relationship with them, and they've actually brought out some of the problem students. They've actually found a way to encourage them and say, no, you're doing it, or yes, do it. And that's what we tell ourselves too when we think that we haven't made it anywhere. We say, no, you're doing it. Just do it your way, or, allow yourself to do it, to allow yourself to participate in Krishna consciousness. Just don't, you just hope the student doesn't run out, or doesn't throw a tantrum or hurt somebody.
And, I had a secret weapon. It was this little like musical instrument, a tomatone. It has a sliding digital synth sound, it has that kind of face on it. And you bring that out and everyone's just like, what is that? So we'll get some tricks, try to get some tricks, and then share these tricks about how to control the mind with others, with your friends. Share these little tricks because we can help each other in that way. And there's a lot of people out there that need guidance in the world, and we want to help them. And it makes Guru very happy. It makes Srila Prabhupada very happy when we distribute a book, and it makes Krishna very happy because you don't know how much that person could really thank you. You don't know, even if you never see them again, you don't know what it could mean to them in their lives. And maybe they're able to remember Krishna at the point of death, and which is a great goal. We're trying to train ourselves because we don't know when death comes. Prabhupada said, what is old age? What is old? Old is just close to death. And so we don't know when death is. So we don't know. We can't, no one is really old unless we know their death is imminent, And so these people can be very happy, and they can hopefully come to the temple and do deity worship and taste the prasad and do some service, render some service for Krishna, and eventually pass out Krishna consciousness to their friends, and we're only happy when we're serving, how surprising is it that, we all maybe grew up thinking we're happy to be served, but true happiness is by serving, and that's really true happiness, the way Nityananda and Balaram and Antashesh, how they want to serve the Supreme. And then text 27, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful. His passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. So we have some passion in our past. Sometimes we might be identifying with our bodies or something, not forgetting that we're not these bodies, and we might be going back to this passionate side of ourselves, which is so hard to sometimes quell. But when the mind is peaceful, the passions are quieted, and we can be free from sin. Purport: Brahma Bhuta is the state of being free from material contamination and situated in the transcendental service of the Lord. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param, Bhagavad Gita 1854. One cannot remain in the quality of Brahman, the absolute, until one's mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Pada Ravindayo. To be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, or to remain in Krishna consciousness, is to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all liberated contamination. So you remember the story about the sparrow, how this is a work in progress, and Krishna will help. And the sparrow had some eggs by the ocean, and the ocean swallowed the eggs up. And the sparrow was very tormented by that. And so it became very determined, the kind of determination we need to have. And it said, I will, little beak by beak, it started taking the ocean water out of the ocean. And it was so determined because it asked the ocean to please give me the eggs back. And the ocean said no. So it started to pick the water out, beakful by beakful. And Garuda, Vishnu's carrier swan, saw this and became inspired. And so he came down and told the ocean, he said, if you don't give the eggs back, I will assist, and I will take all this water out until we get those eggs. So this is plate 22 in the front of the book. You can see Garuda helping the sparrow, getting ready to take the water out. Plate 22. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. So a lot of inspiration from all these stories and from you all. And any comments, questions today that someone might have? Okay, I saw Radha Stali's hand first.
Hare Krishna.
Hey, Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your nice reflection on Bhagavad Gita. I really like this point about tricking the mind. I was listening to a lecture by Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and he was telling the story about a Brahmana and his friend. And his point to the story was that, if we really care about our friends, we'll bring them to Krishna consciousness. We'll bring them in Krishna consciousness as best as we could. And his friend was into dramas, like plays and things like that. And this Brahmana, he knew there was going to be a great soul talking by the Ganga. And he wanted his friend to come. He knew, oh, if my friend just meets this great soul, then he'll come to Krishna consciousness for sure. But the problem was getting his friend to come, because his friend knew, like, I know what your intentions are. I'm not going. But then he said, I'm going to trick him. The Brahmana said, I'll trick him and I'll tell him there's going to be a great drama by the Ganga. So he told him, he said, please come. There's this traveling drama and they're coming to the Ganga. Please come. He said, oh, really? Yes. Okay, I'll come. So in that way, he tricked his friend to come. And I forget the end of the story. I'm sorry, but hopefully he came to Krishna consciousness. But anyways, our my mind is so troublesome to where it ebbs and flows. And so that's the only way I think I could really get my mind to choose Krishna conscious activities over, lamenting or meditating on my issues or seeming problems that I think are bigger than they are. Just a matter of like, okay, if I just read right now or chant right now, and then I'll think about that later. Just like Haridas Thakur, he's like, in a way, he tricked the prostitute by, he did, from the story we hear, it doesn't say that he tricked her, but he was just being himself. But in a sense, he was tricking her, into Krishna consciousness. So,
Jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for that. He was certainly unwavering, and he allowed her to get closer to Krishna consciousness somehow. And like you said about not distributing to our friends, or if we know someone, we don't bring it up, or it's kind of a form of violence, as they say, which you can feel that sometimes, where it's like, gosh, how big of a disservice am I doing to this person? They deserve Krishna consciousness. They deserve a chance. And then, I feel like sometimes if I can just bring people to the temple, if they could just meet, Guru Dev, like so many wonderful things can happen from that. So I'm working on more and more tricks and things like that. So, anyone else have anything? All right. Thank you all so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Hare